some people, by luck or otherwise, they've learned the formula for baking a certain game. Those people really know one recipe, are lucky enough to use that their whole career. Good for them, right? But they don't know how to cook. If they have to pivot and they say, guys, we're not doing racing games anymore, we're making MOBAs or whatever, right? Because they don't know how to cook, they don't know the fundamentals, the underpinning of their discipline, they are out of luck.
Are people at your game studio all going in a million different directions, but no one seems to have the time or desire to solve that? What is it that best predicts success in game development? When devs say making games is hard, what are they really talking about? The success rate of games seems to be dropping every year. While we often fall back into thinking process or expertise can save us, the reality is that even when those things are buttoned up, failure is still more likely than success. Is there anything we can do to improve our chances? Well, we're talking with Dr. Graham McAllister, and we'll be talking about what you can do and where you should invest energy to solve what really matters to build better games and avoid the failures. Let's get back into this. This podcast is for leaders in game development who are frustrated with solving the wrong problem. So there's a lot of solving the wrong problem going on in this world of vision and setting it and trying to understand it and writing 100-page design docs or over-defining your audience or building out huge backlogs and roadmaps and all these different things. I know you can't go into the model right now as you're still in the midst of all the research and trying to figure out a lot of that, like what, exactly. I am curious, what advice would you give to that leader in game dev who's like, they're in their studio, they're listening to this and they're going, yes, that's it. Oh my goodness, that's so real. What would you recommend they do differently than they're doing today?
I think the good news is there's one thing is it's cheap and quick. It's just a talk. Get a group of people, back to the leads, for example, of each department or division, how big your team is, and just get, sit in a circle almost like therapy or something and just say, what is the interpretation of the game? And I would encourage you, get them to write it down individually and then just talk about it and see. Just try to surface the variation, right? What are we making? What do you see as unique? Like that question I asked a few weeks ago, or I asked to this team, what makes your game unique? And they couldn't do it. Like, why are you making this game? I was basically asking. Nobody could answer. If I asked, what are you making? They could all answer that. Look at all the stuff we're doing. We're busy. But why are you doing it? I don't know. Not really. It's not unusual. So this is, again, getting to the why, getting to the right layer, not asking, what are you doing? Which is what most stand-ups and things like that tend to focus on. What are you doing? I'm building a thing. Cool, go and build your thing. Why are you building the thing? How does that fit into the game? And I don't mean something technical. We're making part of that feature. Try and get rid of the features chat. Why are you making the game? That's what I'm interested. We're making experiences. Again, I was going back and reading Jesse Schell's, book of lenses, the art of game design, and the book basically starts off one of the early pages by saying design is about experience, but then he admits that it's difficult. And his solution to the problem is, let's have all these lenses. Like you've got a bunch of lenses you can think through to try and solve the problem. So Jesse's a genius, but I love Jesse very much, But his book came up in some of the interviews I'm doing, and people said, yeah, we know Jesse's work, but it's too difficult to use. It's not a tool that we actually could use in our day-to-day business. They're aware of it, but they can't use it. So this is a slight tangent. When I was trying to design mine, I was aware of the usability of the tool. That it has to be quick and simple. Why did it take so long? Why 5 years? It's 5 questions, right? It's one side of a page.
Yeah.
It was making it simple.
Abraham Lincoln, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but I apologize for writing you a long letter. I did not have enough time to write a short one. Excuse my paraphrase, but
it's exactly that. I could have wrote a book, hundreds of pages on a really technical solution. Nobody would have used it. That's like, what's the least I can do to get this idea out there? What's the bare minimum? I think I can cut it to 4 questions, by the way, but it doesn't matter.
I appreciate that you're going for it, though.
I'm a minimal guy. I'm definitely a reducer. If you can take something away, I would. But so this is what I think they should do. Is just the simplest. Get people to talk and encourage them to get away from BS conceptual language. We're making an exciting, engaging, unique experience. We're not interested in that. And they might find it difficult, by the way, and they should find that interesting. Because if they do this and the group finds that interesting, that is interesting by itself. Why do we find this difficult to talk about? As professional game creators, why can't we talk about the experience that we make? It's like imagine getting a room full of professional bridge builders or something, but none of them knows any of the mathematics or physics or fluid dynamics. But we're going to build a bridge. It wouldn't happen. It would not happen, right? Anybody have any idea about that? Right? Or building a plane. Anybody know anything about building plane? No, I don't know much. But I can build a widget. Cool, you're in. Like, it wouldn't happen, really. But our business is experiences. But we don't talk about that. We talk about the things that we make. And one of the things that come out in the interviews, you'll be familiar with this story, is this belief, and BioWare Magic made it famous, that if we just wait long enough, we'll find it. A lot of people talked about finding the fun, or it'll come together near the end. And lots of people talked about that, both in my interviews and public ones. And the problem is with that, that's again survivorship bias, where there's lots of people, they did not find the fun. The studio was closed, Paradox yesterday. The studio was closed, the game was shuttered, people were let go well before the fun was found because they didn't know the why. By the way, I'm not saying that the game doesn't have to pivot a few times to find it after that. I'm not saying...
Absolutely,
once it's set in stone. I don't want anyone to think that's the case. What I'm saying is...
If you can talk about it, then you can change it.
Exactly. That's the thing. When we do the workshop, it pinpoints, here's the thing, and then we fix it. It's like, oh, cool, now we know what it is, where the variation's coming from. We put it back on track. What I'm saying is, you're all setting off on a journey without a map, and then you're surprised you all end up in different places. What I'm saying is, if I give you a map, would that be helpful to you? That's where we're going with this model. That's what's missing.
So I'm a leader in game dev. You're saying, look, grab some of the people that are following you. Grab some of your peer leaders. Grab some people, hop into a room, have an open conversation. What are we making? Not what are we making in terms of stuff. What is this experience?
What's the experience? Why are we making it? Why is this unique? Why is this game unique? What's the difference? We're putting together a unique combination of things. Some of them may be the art style. Some of them may be features. Some of them may be a tone or an emotion. Some may be the setting. It comes in different forms, right? We're putting together a collection of different things to produce a new why, a new thing. What is the why? How would you describe it? But it's not the features. What are they producing? What are the features producing? What's the tone producing? What's the artwork producing? I don't mean emotions either. Not like, it's a moody, atmospheric. We can see that. That's in the art style. Again, it's even difficult for me to talk about without giving you the solution in a way. But it should be interesting to them enough that it's difficult to talk about. How come our core job, the core reason we do this thing, is also simultaneously the hardest thing to talk about? And nobody, I've got the interviews beside me here, the transcripts. Nobody can talk about it. Nobody, from billion-dollar companies down to, small indies. They all talk about features and conceptual stuff, but you try and dig into the experience. What's it doing? Why is it different from those games? They keep going back to features or something you can point to.
Right. I think part of me gives it a little bit of You talked at the very beginning. There's too much in the world for us to grasp. If I actually had to absorb everything I saw when I woke up in the morning, I'd be frozen.
You'd be a wreck. Yeah.
Right. You have to filter. And it is interesting to me that in an industry filled with so many passionate people and gamers, maybe I would say it's not surprising that they attempt to leverage their prior experience with genres and games to shortcut the conversation. And so when they talk about the idea of, what am I making? It's going to be a co-op roguelike, blah, 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 or something like that, right? It makes sense. And yet, the thing that you've said that underpins the problem there is, when I experienced StarCraft 2, and my brother experienced StarCraft 2, or StarCraft, Brood War, whatever, we actually experienced it in subtly different ways because we're different people with different preconceived notions and different intentions of what we were trying to do. And so if I'm playing this single player, am I trying to play it through as fast as I can because that's how I think you're supposed to play this? Or is my thing always build a 200 out of 200 army, right? Max out what I can build and then just go crush the enemy in one big huge push.
Mm.
And so when I attempt to shortcut while I'm making a strategy game, and I go, oh, I know what that means. We're going to build a huge giant army, and someone else is going, with as few units as possible, I'm going to be as precise as possible and complete that. That's what strategy means. And you know, perhaps people have different, but there's different interpretations of these words, and there's different assumptions that we build in, and then we assume something my dad says. Everybody assumes they're normative, and it's not. You're not. We're all very actually distinct from each other and different, and we approach all these problems with unique frames.
You mentioned an interesting word there. I wrote down like underpinning, and I think this is getting to the root of the problem. Where I was watching a podcast recently with Lex Friedman, and he was interviewing, I may get the name wrong, Jim Keller. Jim Keller, I think, is the guy that made the microprocessor, or part of the team that made all that microprocessor design. And he's talking about how microprocessors are designed. And he says every 10 or 15 years, you're meant to throw all your work out and start again because there's new models and ways of thinking and stuff like that. But he said people don't do it. They try to just optimize. And he was given this analogy, which I think I'm about to butcher, which applies to the game industry, I think, where some people, by luck or otherwise, sometimes find a successful formula for a game. They make a successful first-person shooter or a racing game or insert thing here. And so they do that for a lot of their career. They know how to do it once and they make a few small tweaks. And maybe they get really good at that. They've learned the formula for baking a certain game. I'm going to use the baking metaphor he used. But he's saying those people really know one recipe. They've hit across one recipe by luck or otherwise. And maybe they are lucky enough to use that their whole career. Good for them, right? But they don't know how to cook. If they have to pivot and they say, guys, we're not doing racing games anymore. We're making MOBAs or whatever, right? Because they don't know how to cook, they don't know the fundamentals, the underpinning of their discipline. They are out of luck. They have no idea how to deliver the player experience of another genre. They're like, but I know how to do this one thing. We don't make that anymore. We're making this other thing. But I'm really good at that one thing. I'm sure you are. We don't do that here. Damn, I don't know how this actually works. I only know how to apply the recipe. I don't know how to cook. I don't know the chemistry. I don't know the underlying fundamental principles of this field that would allow me to make a MOBA, a first-person shooter, a racing game, a platformer, an open-world game. I can make any of these because I know how the experience works. That's what I can do. And I can make anything you want. But I think, as you said, we see a lot of it in our industry. I know how to bake this cake.
One of the things that a lot of people have complained about recently is that many times job descriptions and job requirements get very specific. But what you're basically saying is, hey, look, if we're an industry of people who all know one recipe, the reality is if I'm asking for one meal, I really only want people who have made that meal before because none of you are cooks.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's a weird way. It's like, it's not good, but it's this, hey, you know, I'm trying to make a new IP MMO. Have you made a new IP MMO before? Because if you haven't, I'm less interested in talking to you. You know, because even if you've done it badly, you've at least attempted the recipe compared to all the other people that have maybe built a million other types of games. Again, I don't think that rationalizes just how specific we can get, but it speaks to that idea of cooking versus knowing a recipe.
I think there's something else there that's worth pointing out, which is even the people who have had success once, if I look at my research, I would say that I'm not sure they even understand why they got the success.
Yes, I agree.
They got the success, but I'm not sure they understand how they got it. So when they come to replicate it, they're going to be out of luck. And then when their game fails, they'll probably blame the market. Well, we couldn't find the players to market. What can you do? You know, it wasn't them, obviously, because they knew how to do it before.
Yeah, they've made successful games. Yeah,
exactly.
No, but it's. I think it's spot on. And again, that's where the confirmation bias and our ability to rationalize whatever reality we're in really kicks in strong. I remember doing a retro with a team, and it was very interesting how many people in this particular retro said something to the effect, because I came in as like an outside consultant to facilitate it. Something to the effect, the game was kind of a critical success, but a commercial failure. So for most studios, that ends up being not a great thing. I mean, it helps your resume, but you know, we might all be job searching soon. And that didn't actually happen. The studio leadership did some really cool stuff and found them some other deals. And but a lot of people said something to the effect of, you know, the game didn't succeed in the way we were hoping, but I worked with some really great people. We did some really great work. Hey, I've been in this industry a while. That's a win. And I remember kind of going like, yikes, like, wait a minute, you know, and I kind of get that there's a part of it that is, hey, that might just be an optimist looking through an optimistic lens. I'm proud of the work I did, even if the game didn't turn out great. Like, if I'm random VFX artist number 7 on a team, maybe I didn't have the authority or influence to drive this all in a better direction. And so I'm taking comfort in that, like, hey, you know what, we did some good stuff here. Simultaneously, though, it was kind of like, whoa. You will always be able. Yeah. You will always be able to get to the end of whatever happens and go, you know what though, worked with some great people, because our industry's filled with great people. I think that's true.
That's true.
And did some good work. You know, learned some things. This one was a win, and it was like, but wait a minute, no, it's not. And again, I can disconnect myself from that reality. To your point, we didn't find the players, the market wasn't right. These various things. There's 2 other questions I want to ask about. Okay, so first question. You haven't talked about audience a ton. And when I usually talk to people when they're talking about vision and all this different stuff, everybody always ends up talking about audience. Quite a bit. And I'm curious if that is, well, I'll just say, what's going on there?
So I think in my model, the game is the audience. I don't see any distinction. So when I do my decomposition of what game are you making, it basically tells you, not everything, because you have to augment it a bit, but it tells you a lot of your audience as well. So for me, the answer to what game are you making is simultaneously the answer to this is your audience. Think about it this way, where imagine you play a game that you like. You mentioned Elden Ring earlier. And you think, I like this game. There must be something that game is doing that resonates in you and makes you think, I like this thing. It doesn't mean you like all Souls games, probably. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Or all games of that genre. You might just like, exactly. You might just like this particular one. So this is part of the insanity where people say, we're going after that genre. It's like, really? You think all games in a genre are the same? Because I don't see that
or they all attract the exact same people.
Yeah. So that's again, this is back to, these are all the same problem. And I said at the beginning something like, I think not only do you not even know what game you're making, you don't know where your game sits on the market. You can't compare with others. And this is the same problem because of how they do it, how they look at their game and their audience and their market is the same problem we're talking about all of this for their game. They're using the same basic things. What genre is it? What's the art style? And you see these graphs like
this. Okay,
ours is more simple art style, or
that is. So I made a post on LinkedIn just a couple days ago, where I've been messing with a few different city builders. I don't know why I got the itch to play city builders, so I've been like going through a couple, and I was playing.
You have too much time in your hands. They're a good time.
I know I don't. That's the problem. They're very dangerous. I was playing Anno 1800. And I was playing it, and I had some bumps here and there, but overall it seemed pretty good. But I started to realize that there was going to be this aspect of setting up trade routes between my islands, and for whatever reason, I just didn't want to. And I like city builders. I've always liked city builders, but it just something about this, and I kind of played along, and I kind of tried to hack my way around it. And the game, I'm not saying the game is bad, but for whatever reason, it was just like not for me. Yeah, not for me.
I've had that.
Right in my genre, right in like so many ways it lines up. And so this is kind of matching what you're saying. And then I thought about that with other things where there have been games, sometimes Elden Ring is an example, where although I wouldn't say I really loved the game, I played it quite a bit, and I did enjoy it. I didn't regret that playing. I'm not a Souls. I don't like that type of game. And other experiences where maybe there's like one, so Elden Ring's an example where this one game I did like in a genre that I tend not to. And so and Anno is this example. Anno 1800 is an example of like I didn't like this one in a genre that I usually enjoy.
Right. So the way I look at it, my model looks at it, would explain that difference. It'll say, here's the difference between game A and game B. Like you like this one in the same genre and you don't like this one or whatever. The model would explain the variation, which is here's what's different. So it's the same thing. So the same model. All the arguments we've had for the game, also apply to the audience and the
Right.
the
And so for you,
competitors.
yeah, there is just a merging of these two things because
Yeah,
how can I talk about
exactly.
an experience without someone to experience it?
There's a connection. Exactly that. It's like if I like a game, there's something similar, something connecting you to that game. But I'm saying because you don't know what your game is, you can't articulate that. You cannot articulate your audience, which
So
is why
so
you
then
say 18 to 24-year-olds in America. It's like, eh,
right. Right.
you
Well,
know.
and
Anyway, yeah.
I'm going to go one step further then. A lot of people use models for their audience where they say, "Oh, we're going after the couch co-op player or the
Yeah,
min maxer or
yeah,
they
yeah,
again they have all these different models and they'll break
yeah.
out player motivation and they'll say, oh, are you an explorer, are you more about strategy, are you more about combat or action
Yeah.
boom. I've seen so many of these, and
Me too.
I think as models they probably all, what George Box said it best, all models are useful, or all models are wrong, some are useful, right?
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
but there's this idea of like these might have some utility, but from where you're sitting it's like, hey, the problem you're trying to do is different than what that is solving.
Mine's similar, I would say. It's not a million miles
Okay.
away from those. Again, I've borrowed one from
Okay.
somewhere else. But there are ones out there that I'll just say, not too much a fan of, let's say. Like they're nearly there, but they have certain problems. Some are pretty poor, like they're just made up. Like I think games should be like this, but there's nothing really behind it. And so it is getting at that. It is player motivation based. So you've got
Yeah.
like demographics, males 18 to 24 in America. That's standard
Right.
answer. You've got behavior, what games have they played? Because when I ask people how they're doing it, they're saying all this stuff. What games are you playing? Where do you play them? What age are you? And all that sort of thing. But again, none of those things explain why you would play a certain game. What is the
Right.
connection between you and that game? None of those things. You're not playing that game because you're 18 years old. That's not the explanation.
Right.
Maybe part of it, maybe more free time or something. But it's not a game oriented reason, let's say. So it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
So you're right in terms of my model would collapse all those things into one by saying there's something in common, and then you'll add on little bits around the edge to augment that to get a more complete picture. But the fundamental, they've all got one thing in common: the game, the player, your competitors' games, and my model is something at the center, which is exactly the same. This middle layer,
Yeah.
essentially.
So you would say that if somebody's out there and they're not sure what model to use and they can't find yours because you're still doing the research, but they're looking at this, you'd say, hey, look more at player motivation based models
It's
than
probably
anything
going to
else.
give it's probably a
Give you a
better,
little bit more bang for your buck.
yeah, motivation and behavior as well. But motivation's more an explanatory tool. Behavior says we know they're doing it. They're playing these types of games. The motivation's more the why behind it. Why? Why do you think? What could possibly be an explanation why they're playing this game and not that game? But again, motivation is not the full picture. It's only part of the picture. The model has to add something else to explain, to explain other things like your preferences.
But ask the annoying question that I talked about earlier when we were talking about consulting. But what are the outcomes? Like what is reported back to you about the impact of your intervention?
I wish I could show. So I sent out a survey at 4 questions at the end of the workshop. I've only been doing it for the last 30 or so, I would say. So in the beginning, it was I didn't even know I had a thing, so I didn't even bother sending a survey. It's like, let's just do it. I was still iterating very fast. The response is that it highlights problems they never knew they had. If I was to generalize, that's the thing. So it's an anonymous survey. They can fill out what they want. I asked 4 questions. One is, would you find this useful? You personally, did you find this useful today? The second question is, would this be useful for your team? So I'm asking them to think about others. Would this be useful? The third one is, what's your main takeaway? And the fourth one is, what's the one thing I should change to make this better? So that's been there for the last 2 years or something, whatever it's been, I don't know. The general feedback is, it's a 5-point scale from extremely useful to not useful at all. The first one, did you find this useful, or the team one? It's either, broadly speaking, I would say 90% very useful or extremely useful. Like this has highlighted a problem that we probably knew we had, but we couldn't articulate it. There have been some people who say middle, like, nah, don't think it did anything, or they are rare. And I think, I don't believe that's the true case, because I see the responses from the whole team. and I know what the team are saying as a whole. So if there's an outlier, and now again you do get one or two outliers, it's like they are not wanting maybe to admit that something's
wrong.
Not yeah, yeah, pretty much. So that's interesting in itself. You're almost gazing into their psychology, right? It's like we have all seen the results, and we've seen it as a team. We all looked at it at the same point in time. You saw inside your colleague's brain. You saw what they were thinking for these 5 answers in this specific structure. We've pinpointed the exact point where the variation in interpretation is. It's not vague. Like it's pretty precise, right? So if you don't find that used for someone to say, nah, that's shocking, but that's the outlier. The
no, for me, I'll say real quick. I don't actually think it's shocking. I think it is the stuff productivity obsession that I see so much. Where if you actually are and there's a lot of people out there who are in the frame of, if I'm a leader in games, my job is to make sure more stuff comes out. And this didn't help me make more stuff. This took time away.
Yeah.
You just slowed us down. You just slowed us down. We were making stuff. I could have been continuing to help people make stuff more.
Yeah. What I would say is,
I spent 4 hours with you talking about vision. Oh, did that again.
That happened. There was one case where someone came onto the workshop and said, "Do I have to be here?" Right. That was the opening phrase. Because clearly a producer had brought them in and said, "We're doing this thing today. It's 4 hours of Graham, whatever." And they were obviously pissed off about it. So they came in and said, "Do I have to be there?" And the answer was, "Yes, you have to be here because you're important to the game." So at the end of the workshop, they said publicly, "Thank you so much for making me be here. This really transformed my thinking." And here's the one thing I would say. Not only do they find it useful, that's just a general high level people are reporting. It's either very useful or extremely useful. That's the normal result. Mm-hmm. What they're saying is useful by far is that they are seeing how their colleagues are thinking. That is the main consistent takeaway. It's not just that, hey, we're realigned and we weren't aligned 4 hours ago. That's a given, right? That's the obvious. We all saw that happen. What was interesting is I thought it was just me. It's more like the psychology of the team, right? Saying, I thought maybe it was just me that wasn't seeing the full picture. What I saw today is none of us had the full picture.
Yeah.
The team had the full picture. We had to work together as a team to understand the full picture because different people had different parts of the puzzle. And we only formed the full picture when we were together and talking about it in a structured way. Because a lot of them say, hey, we've talked about it before. Is this another one of those meetings where we just talk? It's like, no, you talk before. You do that every week. The difference in this one is you're talking with a specific structure where we can see the variation. And I emphasize that at the beginning and the end. It's the structuring that surfaces the variation in thinking. Getting in the room and talking is not doing that. It's confusing you, if anything. It's just going around in an endless circle of talking. I told them before what the game was. Why don't they get it? Because you didn't articulate the middle, the bit that's missing. This brings that up, this hidden bit, and says, how are you? When you fill that gap in, what the game experience was, what did you fill in? Well, here's what I did. Well, guess what? That's not the same as the other 14 people on the team, or actually you're all different, which happens a lot as well. So this is the thing that happens, and the feedback is, I now see that it's not just me that had this problem. Yeah. People are guilty almost. Maybe I didn't hear them right. Maybe I'm not experienced enough. Maybe I should have worked harder, or maybe I should have, Yes.
I can speak to my own. One of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is because when I was a producer and I showed up on a team and I had no idea what I was doing and I had a background in military combat and logistics, I remember looking around and seeing how stuff ran, and a common thing was like when I'd see something and it didn't seem right, I would kind of go like, "Am I the crazy one?"
Is it me?
And I remember when certain mentors came to me and explained something, and I realized I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. It's not just me, or it's not, that might work. Oh, there's science behind that, or okay, this is actually a valid approach. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to help leaders in game development realize that you're not crazy. Like if you're sitting around your office going like, in this case, why aren't we aligned, or are we aligned and I'm the one who doesn't get it, or Like, what's the right, why is everybody doing this? It doesn't seem like it seems like we're doing this stuff that's not the most valuable, but nobody seems to want to stop. And I want to encourage people that, like, no, you're not crazy. But like, maybe you are. I can't say for sure you're not. But odds are actually, in my experience, and apparently in yours as well, no, the norm is not that these things are in order. It's that they're not, and that so you're not crazy, and you do need to invest some time. You talked earlier, and this is one's loaded. The different vision between publisher and developer, the creative vision versus the product business vision. And I'm going to ask sort of a weird question. If some people out there listening are publishers, they're leaders in publishing organizations. What advice they have, as you and I both acknowledge, the power in that relationship. They have the money.
They do. Yeah.
What advice would you give to them as the partner with the money and the power as it relates to their game development teams, their studios out there that are trying to make something great?
I think it's probably the obvious answer, which is aligning the boundary of the interface between you and the developer. So if you're
talk to me more. Explain more about that.
So one of the reasons, again, I interviewed quite a lot of people, and there's a lot of talk about failure. Who would have thought, right? One of the reasons for failure is not just that the team couldn't make the game, the team weren't aligned. It's more into the psychology of it, right? It's like trust is breaking down between the publisher and the developer.
Yeah.
So it's a relationship problem. And then you ask the deeper, well, why is the relationship breaking down? Well, something was promised. They were expecting something. Maybe we promised something. And the variation in this case between what they were expecting and what we delivered was so great. And we couldn't resolve that relationship. So the money was pulled. Yeah. And that came out in quite a few stories in different variations, but that's the general idea. And you'll definitely have seen that. It's a common story in the game industry. Publishers are pulling funding. Why is that? It's not... Obviously, there's been a mismatch between what they thought they were getting and what was delivered. And again, if I've done this workshop 70 bunch of times, let's say, and the team can't articulate this sense making, right? They don't know what they're making. They can't sense give. They can't tell the publisher, this is what we are making. They don't know. So in other words, they can't tell accurately what they're getting. The additional problem, we can't just look at it from a technical perspective, is they want the money. So they're kind of inclined, the developer, to overpromise or say whatever they think
will get them the money.
Hear. Yeah. So this came out in one of the interviews where the story was basically, again, these are all anonymous, but the stories are, can be retold. We did what we had to do to get the money, essentially, where the developer or publisher wanted to hear something. We mentioned those words. We got the money. But then we had to go and make it, and we realized we can't really make that game, right? That's not what we do. But the publisher really wanted to hear it to sign the check. So that didn't end well. It's not surprising.
I can imagine not.
Yeah, so, exactly.
So you're talking about the boundary between the publisher and the developer.
Yeah, say you're a VC, and investors ask a bunch of questions to try and measure, should we invest in this studio? And they usually look at things like, how much experience you've got and things like that. The correlation with experience isn't that great, by the way. I have no idea really why they're asking that question. But there is some, but it's not where I'd put my money, let's say. If it was my 10 million or 100 million, I think I'd be asking better questions, which are maybe rooted in science rather than opinion. But,
right,
so what I'd be asking is, okay, there's 4 of you pitching for money today. Are you aligned on the vision? Can I do a vision alignment check on, if 10 studios are pitching for funding from me, I've got 100 million in the bank and I'm going to give some money to someone. 10 people are pitching to me. They all think they can make this game whatever we want or whatever way it's working, right? I would be checking the alignment of that team. Are they aligned on what they're making? Are they aligned first of all? That team is way ahead of the other 9, right? They've probably got a better, they've got a better, if I'm a betting person and they are, and I'm putting my money somewhere, this is the leading predictor of the team's success, right? Vision alignment is the leading predictor of that team getting the job done. This alignment check would say that team is more aligned than all these other people. Either you take that team or you fix the other ones, like realign them. It's up to you. And if there's a mismatch, if there's a match between, okay, they were the most aligned and we want that game to be made, we believe in them, Let's go on that journey. But as long as both parties are seeing the same picture, right? What game are you delivering? Are we both seeing the same game? This is what we're delivering. That's exactly what we want made. And we're going to do this alignment check at various points. At the minute, they're just going on, hey, how long have you worked together? Have you made a game before? Cool, sounds good. Do you want some money? And then they're surprised at 1 in 10.
Two of your people worked at Blizzard /Bungie /Supercell /Riot /Epic. Oh, you must be good.
So here's what I do. When I see those stories of game closure, including the one yesterday that we talked about and all the other ones, I look for words industry veteran. And it's nearly in every single one. Industry veteran, blah, 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 studio is closing. What? So clearly, if there was such a correlation, if you thought there was a strong correlation between your brilliant experience to articulate a vision and your success, then we'd be hiring only industry veterans. But they're not working out too well.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, we've got students
that's a podcast all by itself.
we have students who are making games which are worldwide hits, who are not industry veterans, haven't probably graduated yet. So if it was all about experience, why are they focusing on that? Why aren't the people with the money asking intelligent questions? I'll just leave that hanging there for a while.
I know you're not done with the research yet, but you're getting there. What surprised you?
What I said at the beginning, or near the beginning, where I said, I went in with this proposition, this hypothesis, if you like, that there's a hole in their thinking and how they think about games. And that hole is the very reason why we make games, the experience. And obviously I didn't know what I would see, right? I thought maybe someone would get it. And it still surprises me that it's not out there. That's the main surprise. That's surprise number one, right? That maybe I was hoping to be proved wrong, that it's not as bad, the picture's not as bad as I think. But it appears it is as bad as maybe I think. That this high degree of failure is directly linked to how you're thinking about games. So it's a surprise, but not a surprise maybe in one. And maybe it's also a surprise that that's the state of the whole industry, if that is the picture, isn't that interesting? If that's true, like if I didn't miss anything, and that's genuinely how people are talking about games, and that's who we are. Yet we've got this word professional game developer, professional, we're professionals, we do this for a living. But again, back to the bridge analogy, I'm sure people will pick holes in the bridge analogy, it doesn't matter, but you would understand the underlying principles of your field in most professions. And my central argument in all of this is we don't know the underlying principles of people, the experience layer. When people talk about we've got experience, it's usually at the technical layer. We can build widgets. We're at the cutting edge. Or cutting edge of what? You mean technology really, right? That's all you're talking about here. It's certainly not understanding people or understanding things like that. And this mantra, it even come up today in an article, they said, again, I think it was that studio that was closing or being shuttered, they said, building games is hard. I forget how many times I've heard that. But my retort is, which bit exactly? Is it doing the art? No, we can do the art. Is it the programming? No, we can do the programming. Is it making the audio? No, we can do the audio. So which bit is it? When you say games are hard, tell me specifically which bit is hard. And I think it's bringing those things together, which we call vision. They can't articulate the vision. And I just wish they would say that. Because this generic, it's back to that conceptual language. Because here's the thing, as an organizational psychologist, it's almost like saying that's the norm in the industry. It's like, I'm going to put a generic phrase up front when everybody will nod. Building games is hard, so whatever comes next must be true. But it's like, no, just stop for a second. Let's stop. Let's put a pin in the building games is hard. I want you to articulate which bit specifically, very specifically, you cannot do. Because when we separate the components, you can do all of them. And I think it's the combining of those things specifically that you've got a problem with. And my research, again, tried to prove that. You've got a hole. And that's the problem. That's the hard bit in games. When we get all these discipline experts into a room, we can all do their thing individually. What you cannot do is make sense of the whole picture. Why are they here? Why are they here?
Yeah.
You can't tell me that. Nobody of these people I'm pointing to a pile of transcripts. Nobody can tell me that. That's why,
Yeah, it's funny because I'm thinking about how I would answer that question. Like, let's say we hadn't been talking and someone said, well, why are games hard? And And there's two dominant ideas that come to mind. One is that either you're a solo dev and then it's hard because you have to do everything, and it's really hard to do everything involved in making a game just because it's a massive number of different things. So that one, I would say that it is actually the work of the game that becomes hard. Possible, and some people have done it, but hard. The other side of that, though, is the relationships of just anytime a whole bunch of human beings get together, life gets really complicated. And I think you would tie into that. Yes, and one of the reasons is one of the hardest things to get that group of people to do is align on anything. Is to like I can bring, and this is where we've talked about this before on the podcast, but the idea of all-star teams. Oh, I'll bring in the best of this and the best of that, and I'll bring the best VFX artist and the best, and you pull them together, and you're like, well, all of the best game developers. They've got to make it successful.
Surely they will make it.
And you almost act as if you've done the most important part. And to some extent, by the way, the idea of getting the right people on the bus, there's a reality to that idea, right? I don't want to just knock that idea. But the idea that you're going to bring in 10 all-stars from 10 different disciplines and they're going to somehow together make the best game
work.
That's not how any of it works. And to your point, I think that ties to vision. The second thing I would have said is that the thing that's hard is that so many studios focus more on productivity instead of prioritization. And so they're more focused on, and their leaders are trained, and everybody has this default stance of like, let's move, right? Let's get stuff done. Let's get the work. Let's go. Not, what are the fewest? How do we do the least work possible to achieve the experience we're trying to create, to achieve engagement with an actual player? And then how do we iterate on that once we have it? That is incredibly difficult. And so there's this idea, it's basically a restatement of what you said, but the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That is true with every successful game out there. It's not. I can probably find a bad game that has amazing individual components in it. And in fact, I know I can. I've played them, right?
Me too.
And the hardest thing is picking which things. And to pick which things are most important, you have to know the why.
So what we're saying here is, to sum up, it's teamwork. Whenever you get a team of people, so that analogy you made, we get all the all-stars. That's a group of people, like individuals, no interconnection, right? It's like you're best at art and programming and design. That is not a team. That's a group. Like you're all here, but why are you together? What are you working towards? A team, you have to have alignment to have a team. We're here for that purpose, that singular purpose. And as you probably are well aware as well, that sometimes those ninjas and gurus and experts, they are not great team players. So the science, we haven't talked about, again, this could be like a 3-part podcast. We haven't talked about what makes you a good team player. People think that it's your individual skill, which is clearly not true. I would take someone who's a team player over someone who is a bit better at their own discipline. Like if 2 people we could hire, this person's better than that player, better than that person. Who's the better team player though? You're asking the wrong question. You just focused on technical ability. Can they do the thing better?
Yep.
I think you're asking the wrong question. The science of teams is you want team players. They're the ones who'll get it done. And the overall output will be better. The other ones are probably more toxic. Well, again, we're generalizing here.
Even if we don't say they're toxic, because I think maybe that goes too far. It's that there's an increase, especially if they're all-stars and they're known as all-stars. There's an increase in, how I say this, the number of assumptions they make about what it means to work well as an individual and collectively. There are more of them. Because often the all-stars have more experience. They've maybe shipped some successful games. They have preconceived notions of what it means to work together. Yep. And the problem is that, again, everybody assumes they're normative. They're not. So you put them with a bunch of other people who also have very strong opinions of what it means to succeed both individually and together. And all of them have different models of how we should collaborate, communicate, and all this different stuff. And they have to figure that out. And you can end up with too many people who want to make the call. You can end up with nobody who wants to make the call. But you're like, well, wait a minute. You're supposed to be the best in the world. Why can't you figure this out? And again, it's because they have baked in all the dysfunction of their past into a functional working model, But you put all those together and there's nothing that says that will together be functional.
I was reading a paper yesterday, actually. It was about medical research. But they were talking about what makes a hospital team perform well, and one not perform well. And they couldn't find any correlation with process. They were like, yeah, it's just not really moving the needle that much. But vision and culture, they specifically said the main differentiator between these two hospital teams, there's many hospital teams, but the high and low performers, was specifically about how they thought and how they approached their work. That the high performing hospital, they felt they were in it together. We're all here to save the patients. That was their mission and their vision. Yeah. And the low performing ones were all about them. You know, like they give examples where the surgeon would come in and hand the coat to the nurse, hand his jacket to the nurse in the corner. Like, just, I'm the master, I'm in control, you take my coat, and just horrible behaviors, you know. Mm-hmm. But the process actually, it does come up in other research. Those are in the top three, like culture, vision, and process would be up there. In this specific example, though, they couldn't find the correlation with process, but other people have. So, but that's a pretty good model. Research would support that, you know.
I've seen even in game development the idea that it's more important that everybody at the studio buys into the process than whatever particular process you have. Because if you have the perfect process, but nobody cares or nobody abides by it, it's useless. And even if you have a bad process, if everybody buys into it and engages with it, you're going to get more mileage than a great process that nobody uses. This was such a phenomenal conversation. I really enjoyed it. I want to summarize the key points for those listening. So number one, if you're concerned about the vision at your studio, one thing to do, get a group of your leaders together and ask everyone to write down answers to a few questions. Things like, what game are we making? Why are we making it? Why is the game unique? Second, just because you or someone has had success doesn't mean it can be replicated. Do you only know one recipe, or even just got lucky, or do you really know how to cook? Third, your game and your audience are in some ways the same thing. Don't get stuck thinking you can attract MOBA players, or worse, males 18 to 24. That's not a very useful category for understanding your audience, despite how often it's used. At minimum, be looking to player motivation and perhaps behavior. The relationship, broken or otherwise, between studios and publishers is a major reason for game failure. This isn't surprising, but we do very little, and even are incentivized to set deceptive expectations rather than fix it. If you're looking to invest in a studio, the alignment of the founders is the biggest predictor of their success. That's number 5. Number 6, for those funding studios, experience does not strongly correlate with success. That's got to be a surprise for a lot of people out there who are really looking at that. 7th, if you are struggling with vision, you are not alone. So is basically everyone. Bringing everything together to meet a coherent vision is why making games is so hard. 8th, teams and teamwork are more important than having the best individual contributors. And finally, culture and vision trump process when it comes to leading to game success. We've said this a lot, but it's worth saying again. Your culture and your vision matter more than your process. All right, thanks a ton for listening. I hope you are able to go forward and improve the vision for your studio, and by extension, avoid the biggest failure point in game development. Here's to building better games. Did you enjoy this episode? If you did and are looking for more conversations like this one, join the Building Better Games Discord community. It's for leaders and producers in game dev who are frustrated with solving the wrong problems and who want to share experiences and learn how to lead and build better games. Check out the show notes to join. I'll see you there.